I'll bet $1,000,000 that boy can't survive 10 moves against me. 1,000,000. Right here, in front of everyone. Preston Whitfield III set the check on the table like he was folding a napkin, crisp, deliberate. The kind of gesture a man makes when he's absolutely certain no one will call his bluff. Marcus Webb, 18, black, son of the woman who has polished the floors of this estate for 11 years. He pulled out the chair and sat down. The room didn't go quiet. It went something worse. It went amused. And what nobody in that ballroom knew, what Preston Whitfield had no way of knowing when he opened his mouth, was that this young man had not lost a single rated chess game in 4 years. Not one. But we're not starting there. We're starting 6 miles away. 6 miles in a universe. 4:58 in the morning. A 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building on Callaway Street in Camden, New Jersey. Marcus's alarm doesn't ring. He's already awake. He's been awake since 4:30, sitting at the kitchen table under the one overhead light that works, a folding chess set open in front of him. The set is missing its black bishop. He replaced it with a bottle cap from a root beer he drank the night. His grandfather came home from his last hospital stay. He never replaced it with a real piece. He practices around the gap, the way water finds a path around stone. On the wall next to the refrigerator, a bus schedule is held up with a magnet shaped like the state of New Jersey. Below it, 6 pages of chess puzzles printed at the public library on Haddon Avenue, each one covered in Marcus's penciled annotations. Not random notes, systems, patterns he recognized and named for himself before he ever learned the official terms. His shoes sit by the door in a straight line. 2 pairs, one for school, one for tournaments. The tournament pair has a thin crack along the left sole, sealed with a strip of weatherproof tape. He checks the tape every Sunday night before bed. His mother, Diana, left at 4:15. She works 3 jobs. The Whitfield estate on Edgemont Road in Cherry Hill is the first one. She arrives before the house wakes up, enters through the service entrance on the east side of the building. And by the time Preston Whitfield is reaching for his coffee, Diana has already pressed the tablecloths, arranged the centerpiece flowers, and wiped every surface in the dining room to a mirror shine. She does this in the dark. Mostly, she prefers it that way. There was a morning, 8 months ago, when she came in wearing a navy cardigan, instead of the plain gray one the house manager had specified for staff. She didn't realize until the house manager, a thin man named Gerald with a clipboard he carried like a weapon, stopped her in the hallway and said, without lowering his voice, "The dress code exists for a reason, Diana. You represent this house." She went home that night and ironed the gray one 3 times before she was satisfied it looked right. She never mentioned it to Marcus. Now let's go 6 miles in the other direction. The Whitfield estate. 14 rooms, 7 acres, a tennis court that gets resurfaced annually whether or not anyone has played on it. Preston Whitfield III wakes at 7:45 to a cup of Guatemalan single-origin coffee prepared by his housekeeper and the Wall Street Journal on the nightstand beside him. He reads 3 paragraphs of the front page and moves to the opinion section. He considers this staying informed. Preston Whitfield did not build his fortune from nothing, which is something he is careful never to say out loud, because the version he tells at charity dinners is more compelling. The truth is, he inherited a commercial real estate portfolio from his father, expanded it during a favorable rate environment, and has spent the last 12 years being congratulated for things the market largely did for him. He is worth somewhere between $340 and $400 million, depending on the quarter, and he knows both numbers with precision. He is also, by his own accounting, a chess enthusiast. His home office on the 2nd floor contains 4 display cases. One holds a hand-carved alabaster set commissioned from an artisan in Florence for $170,000. One holds a set constructed from reclaimed wood salvaged from a Civil War-era courthouse in Savannah. One sold a set he purchased at a Sotheby's auction without knowing who made it, only that it was expensive. The fourth case is empty. He's waiting for the right piece. He plays chess the way wealthy men play golf, often, confidently, and against people who understand that losing is part of their job description. His rating on the club's private server is 1,480. He believes this makes him formidable. He has never played anyone who was genuinely trying to beat him. This is the part that matters. Remember it. Marcus at school. Riverfront High on the south side of Camden. The building is 11 years older than its last renovation. The lockers on the second floor don't close properly, so students loop zip ties through the handles. Marcus is a senior, 4 months from graduation, moving through the hallways the way a person moves through a place they've already mentally left. Not invisible because he's timid. Invisible because he's somewhere else, running games in his head, replaying positions, thinking 3 moves ahead just haven't happened yet. He eats lunch at the table near the emergency exit, a chess book open beside his tray, a worn paperback copy of Garry Kasparov's My Great Predecessors, Volume 2. The spine is cracked. Several pages are dog-eared. There is a coffee stain on page 214 that's been there since he got it from the donation shelf at the Camden Public Library. One afternoon in October, his history teacher, Mr. Calloway, stopped beside his desk and looked down at the position Marcus had sketched in the margin of his notebook. Not doodling, working. "Is that a Nimzo-Indian?" Calloway asked. Marcus looked up. "I used to, a long time ago." He didn't say anything else. But the next week, when the school received a flyer about the South Jersey Regional Scholastic Chess Championship, Mr. Calloway taped it to Marcus's locker. No note. Just the flyer. Marcus competed. He won all 7 rounds. On his backpack, there's a small pin. A rook, solid black enamel, about the size of a thumbnail. His grandfather gave it to him 7 years ago, after his first tournament win. A rook, his grandfather said, pressing it into his palm. Doesn't move in fancy directions, doesn't jump over things, just goes straight, all the way across the board. Nothing stops it. He paused. "That's you, Marcus." The pin has been on every backpack Marcus has owned since then. If you look carefully in the video footage from that night, and millions of people will look carefully, you can see it clipped just below the left shoulder strap. Remember the pin. It comes back. Now Preston Whitfield, same afternoon, corner office in his Cherry Hill investment firm, glass walls facing the Delaware Valley. He is on the phone with his PR consultant discussing the Whitfield Classic, his annual charity chess gala. He holds this event every November. Guests pay $2,500 a plate. Half goes to a literacy foundation he sits on the board of. The other half covers the event. "I want a titled player this year," he says. "Someone with credentials. Someone who can do commentary, make it look serious." He hangs up and opens a chess app on his phone, selecting a bot rated at 900. He wins in 14 moves. He sets the phone face down, satisfied. 3 weeks before the gala, Diana receives the event briefing from Gerald. 80 guests confirmed. Catering from a firm in Philadelphia. A string quartet. A raised platform in the center of the ballroom with the alabaster chess set under a spotlight. And one additional instruction Gerald delivers at the end, almost as an aside. He's welcome to wait in the service kitchen during the event. Out of sight. Your son, not Marcus. Not even his name. Diana nods. She writes it on her notepad. She knows every room in this house except the ones she's not allowed to enter. She has never sat at the dining table she sets every morning. She has never used the bathroom on the main floor. She has learned to be present and absent at the same time, which is a skill nobody teaches you and nobody thanks you for. That evening, she packs Marcus's bag, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a granola bar, his folding chess set, his earbuds. She straightens his collar. He has one good shirt, a white button-down she bought from a thrift shop on Federal Street, and irons every Sunday. She irons it even on weeks when nobody will see it. She says, "It'll just be a few hours." He looks at her hands. The knuckles are dry and cracked from the cleaning chemicals. She uses lotion every night, and it barely keeps up. She smiles at him the way she has always smiled at him. Completely, without reservation, in a way that costs her nothing and gives him everything. "I know, Mom," but they both know what tonight is. Another room where Diana makes herself small so nothing bad happens. Another night where Marcus is supposed to disappear. Supposed to. The Whitfield Classic. Evening. The ballroom looks like a photograph of money. Crystal chandeliers. A quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. Servers moving between guests with trays of champagne and smoked salmon blinis. Women in gowns, men in jackets that fit because they were made to fit specifically for them. And at the center of the room, on the raised platform under a single focused light, the alabaster chess set, $170,000. Hand-carved, flown from Florence, set up like a reliquary holding something holy. Preston Whitfield opens the evening with remarks about community, intellectual excellence, and the responsibility that comes with success. He uses the phrase "rising tide" lifts all boats without apparent irony. He moves to the board for the exhibition game. His opponent is a man named Douglas Fenn. Douglas Fenn manages 3 of Whitfield's smaller commercial properties. He is not a strong chess player. He is, however, very good at understanding which results are expected of him. The game lasts 22 moves. Fenn makes a series of errors that would embarrass a club player. He resigns with a handshake and a gracious smile. Whitfield stands, lifts his palms open to the room. The applause is warm and immediate. Then the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to offer a challenge." He grins. He has the grin of a man who has never been in a room where he wasn't the most powerful person. $1 million. Cash. To anyone here tonight who can beat me at chess. Any taker? He scans the room. He knows every face. He invited every face. This is theater. He knows no one will step forward. The room murmurs politely. A few guests smile. Nobody moves. Meanwhile, service, kitchen, fluorescent lights, steel counter, the smell of warm food and dish soap. Marcus sits on a stool, near the side door with his folding chess set balanced on his knees, working through a position from a Karpov endgame. Move 38. A rook maneuver that looks passive, but seals the entire position over the next 12 moves. He's replayed this game 6 times. He finds something new every time. The kitchen door opens. A young man walks in, tall, mid-20s, wearing a jacket he's visibly uncomfortable in. This is Colin Whitfield, Preston's son, home from his 2nd year at Georgetown. He was supposed to stand in the ballroom looking supportive. He needed 5 minutes away from it. He sees Marcus and stops. "You play?" He nods at the board. "Yeah." Colin looks at the position. He squints. Is that the Karpov-Kasparov game? The 1985 match?" Marcus raises an eyebrow. "You know it?" "My dad made me study it growing up." He pauses, a longer pause. "I quit playing. Got tired of being told I wasn't doing it right." He glances toward the ballroom. He just offered $1 million to beat him. "You should go in there." He says it the way someone says a thing they don't fully mean. A half-joke from a person who doesn't understand what the stakes actually are. Marcus closes the folding set. He holds it for a moment. The set is missing its black bishop. It has been missing that bishop for 3 years. He still wins with it. He wins because of it, maybe. Because the gap trained him to think around problems instead of through them. Diana appears in the doorway. She saw Colin come in. She's been listening from the hall. She looks at her son and shakes her head, once, slowly. The head shake of a woman who knows what happens when they draw attention to themselves in rooms like this one. But Marcus is already on his feet. And somewhere underneath the noise of the ballroom, in a place Marcus can only locate in his chest, he hears his grandfather's voice. The last thing his grandfather said to him, in the hospital room on Haddon Avenue, 3 weeks before the cancer finished what it started. His grandfather, a man named Robert Webb, who drove a city bus for 29 years, and read history books on his lunch break. Marcus Aurelius, Frederick Douglass, Howard Zinn, who never had the resources to give Marcus anything except the clearest, most precise set of instructions Marcus had ever received. Don't ever make yourself small for people who are already smaller than they look. Marcus walked toward the ballroom door. Diana whispered, "Marcus, don't." The door swung open. Marcus Webb did not learn chess from a book. He learned it from a woman the world forgot. Her name was Constance Osi. She was 64 years old when Marcus met her, Nigerian-American. Born in Lagos, raised in Newark, and for 40 years one of the most quietly accomplished chess coaches the American scholastic circuit had never properly celebrated. She had trained 3 national champions. None of them mentioned her name in their winners' speeches. She didn't notice. She never came to the events for the trophies. She came for the players. She ran a free program at the Camden Community Learning Centers on Vine Street, 2 evenings a week. No funding after the city cut the arts and enrichment budget in 2015. She bought the equipment herself. When one of the plastic pieces broke, she replaced it with whatever she had: a flattened rubber eraser, a coin, a bottle cap. Marcus was 11 when Lorraine brought him the first time. She was working late. She always worked late. The learning center was 2 blocks from Marcus's school, and it stayed open until 8. Marcus walked in and stood at the edge of the room, watching Constance play a student who couldn't have been older than 9. Constance didn't look up. "You want to play?" "I don't know how." She patted the chair across from her. "Sit down." By the end of that session, Marcus had beaten 3 students who'd been coming for months. Constance watched him and said nothing. The next week, she had a position set up waiting for him when he walked in. Not a beginner position. A middle game problem from an international tournament. She slid a notebook across the table. "Write down every move you consider, even the wrong ones, especially the wrong ones," Marcus did. He came back the next week with 12 pages of notes. He came back every week for 7 years. By age 13, Marcus was beating adults at open tournaments across South Jersey. By 14, Constance entered him in the New Jersey State Open, an adult tournament, open division. Marcus won. He was the youngest person to win it in 23 years. Constance gave him the rook pin that night, pressed it into his palm outside the tournament hall while the wind came in off the river. "A rook goes straight," she said. "No tricks, no angles, just across the whole board without stopping, that's you." As Marcus got older, he learned to keep his success quiet. He registered for every event under his initials. MW. If any of Diana's employers knew she was driving him to weekend tournaments, instead of picking up overtime shifts, they'd see it as irresponsibility. They'd find a reason to let her go, and losing the job meant losing the apartment. Marcus didn't hide his talent out of humility. He hid it out of mathematics. Diana missed his biggest win. The Northeast Scholastic Invitational in Princeton, where Marcus won all 9 rounds and set a new tournament record for the youngest player to achieve a performance rating above 2,500. She was on her knees cleaning a bathroom on the other side of the state. Marcus called her from a borrowed phone outside the playing hall. "I won, Mom." She was quiet for a second. Then, "I know you did, baby." She didn't ask for the details. She didn't need them. She just believed the shape of what had happened before she knew any of it. That's the young man who just walked through the kitchen door into a room that had never learned his name. 18 years old, USCF rating of 2013, national master level, placing him above 99, 6% of every rated chess player in America. 4 years without a loss, 151 consecutive wins, a folding chess set missing its bishop, a grandfather's voice in his chest, and a billionaire across the board who had never once played anyone who was actually trying to beat him. Marcus stepped onto the platform. The room didn't know what to do with him. He was wearing dark slacks and a white button-down shirt. No jacket. No tie. He was younger than anyone in the room by at least 15 years. He moved without apology, pulled out the chair across from Whitfield, and sat down. The whispers started before he touched his seat. "Is that Diana's boy? What is he doing up there?" Someone should tell him. Preston Whitfield set down his champagne. He looked at Marcus the way a man looks at a minor inconvenience, mildly annoyed, mostly entertained. He reached for the microphone. "Well, it appears we have a taker. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know, this is Diana's son. He helps out in the kitchen sometimes." A smile that filled his whole face, but stopped at his eyes. He wants to play. Let's be generous. Let's give the young man a moment he'll remember. The applause was the kind that condescends. The kind that says, "We're watching you make a mistake, and we're going to clap for you anyway." Marcus's hands rested flat on the table. He did not fold them. He did not fidget. His breathing didn't change. It had. At the commentary table, a woman named Dr. Simone Reardon sat with a microphone and a small monitor showing the board. She was a FIDE international master, brought in from Philadelphia at considerable expense to provide expert color for the evening. She had been watching Marcus since he walked out of the kitchen. She had been watching the rook pin on his bag since before he reached the platform. She picked up her phone and opened the USCF rating lookup database. She typed 2 letters into the search field. MW she filtered by age. Under 20, she filtered by state, New Jersey. One result came back. She read it. She set the phone down. She looked at the board. The game was about to begin. Whitfield took white. He opened with the Queen's Gambit. Pawn to d4, pawn to c4. The kind of opening that announces itself like a firm handshake. Deliberate, classical, safe. It says, "I know what I'm doing and I've decided to show you." Marcus responded without pausing. Knight to f6. He chose the Nimzo-Indian Defense. If the Queen's Gambit is a handshake, the Nimzo-Indian is the hand that grips back a little harder than expected. It says, "I see your structure. I intend to undermine it." Whitfield didn't notice. He was following a script, the same script he always used, the same opening moves he'd learned from a book he'd flipped through 3 years ago and returned to his shelf. He felt comfortable inside that script. Comfortable was the problem. Move 5. Marcus pinned Whitfield's knight with his bishop, a simple move on the surface, barely worth noting. But it created a tension in the center that Whitfield would need to resolve eventually. And the way he resolved it would determine everything that followed. Whitfield pushed a pawn to release the tension. Standard response. The book response. Marcus didn't follow the book. He retreated his bishop to a square it had no obvious business being on. One diagonal back, toward his own side of the board. Whitfield frowned for half a second, dismissed it, and developed another piece. This is what needs explaining. In chess, most players think about what they're attacking. The best players think about what they're building. Marcus wasn't attacking anything on move 6. He was laying a foundation. The bishop that looked like it was retreating was actually repositioning to control a diagonal that wouldn't matter for another 11 moves. Whitfield had no way to see it. He wasn't looking that far. By move 8, something had shifted in the room. Not dramatically, subtly. The way temperature changes in a space when someone opens a window in another room. Dr. Simone Reardon leaned slightly forward in her chair. By move 10, Whitfield's pieces were technically developed, but practically useless. His queen was placed aggressively on a square that looked threatening, but could be neutralized with one move. His knights were pointed at squares. Marcus had no intention of occupying. His bishop on the kingside was staring at a wall of pawns like a man pressed against a locked door. Marcus had fewer pieces in the center, but every piece he had was connected. They supported each other the way load-bearing walls support a building, not visible from the outside, but the reason nothing falls down. Move 12. Whitfield captured a pawn. He saw it sitting unprotected in the center and reached out and took it, smiled. He glanced at the crowd with an expression that said, "This is going as expected." What Whitfield had not understood, what he would spend the rest of the game failing to understand, was that Marcus had left that pawn there on purpose. It was an invitation. While Whitfield bent down to pick up the coin, Marcus moved his knight to a square called E5. From that one square, the knight controlled the 4 most important central squares simultaneously. It couldn't easily be challenged. Marcus had spent the last 5 moves constructing the exact pawn structure that made this possible. Whitfield's extra pawn was worth 1 point. Marcus's knight on E5 was worth the game. Dr. Reardon leaned toward her microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to pause here because something important just happened." Her voice was unhurried. What this young man just executed is called a positional pawn sacrifice. He gave away material not because he miscounted, but because he wanted the position that resulted. This is a technique you see at grandmaster level play. This is not a beginner's instinct. This is preparation. She paused. "I'd like to know who we're watching." She picked up her phone. On the screen, she already had the answer. Whitfield heard her, his jaw set. His eyes moved to the board and back to Marcus and back to the board. For the first time, the performance of confidence cost him something to maintain. This is the part they don't show you in the easy version of this story. The gradual loss of certainty in a man who has built his entire identity on being certain. It doesn't happen in one move. It happens the way a leak in a foundation happens, slow, invisible, and by the time you see the damage is already structural. Move 14. Whitfield tried to simplify the position, offer a trade, reduce the number of pieces, lower the temperature. Knight takes knight. He reached forward and made the capture, almost relieved. Marcus didn't take back. He shifted his rook to a half-open file, declined the exchange. Doing so opened a new diagonal for his bishop and simultaneously created pressure on a weakness in Whitfield's queenside that hadn't looked like a weakness 2 moves ago. Whitfield stared at this for a long time, longer than the game's rhythm warranted. He was seeing something he didn't have a word for yet. A board where every option he considered felt like it led somewhere he didn't want to go. He tried to simplify again on move 16. Marcus declined again. Move 18. Declined. Move 20. Declined. Each refusal was not defensive. Each refusal created a new problem for Whitfield to solve. Imagine you're in an argument with someone who's right. You keep trying to change the subject, move it to simpler ground, something you can handle, and every time you try, they bring it back, quietly, without raising their voice, to the one thing you can't answer. That's what was happening on that board. In the ballroom, something was shifting. The whispers had changed in character. They were no longer amused. They were uncertain. Champagne glasses had stopped moving. The quartet had taken their break and hadn't started back up. 80 people in formal dress stood very still, watching a young man from Camden dismantle, something they had all assumed was solid. A woman near the front, pearl earrings, a gown the color of smoke, leaned to the man beside her and said quietly, "Is he actually winning?" The man didn't answer. He didn't know yet, but he suspected. Diana Carter had followed her son out of the kitchen. She hadn't walked to the front of the room. She'd gone to the edge of the ballroom, half behind a column near the service hallway entrance, where the light was lower and no one would notice her. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, fingers laced tight, watching the platform. She didn't understand the moves. She had never learned chess. She didn't know what an E5 outpost was, or why declining a trade was aggressive rather than passive, or what it meant that Marcus's rook was on a half-open file. But she understood something else entirely. She understood faces, and every face in that room. Every guest who had smiled when Marcus sat down, who had murmured to their companion something condescending and comfortable, every single one of them was staring at her son with a different expression now. Not laughter, not pity. Something more uncomfortable than either. A woman near Diana looked over and said, barely above a whisper, "Is that your son?" Diana nodded. Once, the woman looked back at the board. "He's something else," she said. Her voice had weight in it. Diana pressed her clasped hands against her sternum. She didn't wipe her eyes, she didn't move. She just stood at the edge of a room where she had spent 11 years being furniture and watched her son own the center of it, move 28. Whitfield had been looking for an exit for 6 moves. He found one, or thought he did. He sacrificed his bishop into Marcus's pawn structure. A violent move. The kind of move a man makes when he stopped trying to win and started trying to survive. The bishop crashed forward, pawns scattered, a line opened toward Marcus's king. For a moment, just a moment, it looked dangerous. The room gasped slightly. Someone said, "Oh." Marcus sat perfectly still for the longest pause of the game, hands in his lap, eyes moving across the entire board in a slow scan. Not searching desperately, reading. The way you read a sentence you've already read before and are now looking for the word you underlined. Then he moved his rook 1 square to the back rank. That single move did 2 things simultaneously. It blocked Whitfield's attack, placing the rook on the exact square Whitfield's queen needed to do damage. And it opened a long diagonal for Marcus's bishop, which suddenly had a clear line to Whitfield's king from the other side of the board. 1 move, 2 threats neutralized, 1 new threat created. This is the difference between someone who plays chess and someone who sees it. Whitfield leaned back. For the first time all evening, he didn't look like he was performing confidence. He looked like a man who has just discovered something important about a room he thought he knew well. All the furniture is there. But it's been rearranged, and somewhere in the back of the room, Colin Whitfield, standing against the wall with his arms crossed, watched his father's face. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a person watching something they've been waiting a long time to see. Move 31. Marcus had spent the last 15 moves pushing a single pawn forward, 1 square at a time, quietly, without drama, while Whitfield was focused on knights and rooks and the position near his king. This pawn, the smallest piece on the board, worth exactly 1 point, had walked almost the entire length of the board without being intercepted. It was on the 7th rank, 1 square from the end. When a pawn reaches the opposite end of the board, it transforms. It can become any piece you choose. Every serious player chooses the queen. 9 points, the most powerful piece in the game, created from nothing. From a pawn that everyone watched and nobody stopped. Whitfield had 2 options. Defend against the pawn promotion, or respond to the threat Marcus's rook was now creating on the back rank. He could not do both at once. He chose the rook threat. He moved his queen across the board, check, trying to force a trade, buy time, create chaos. Marcus blocked with his knight, simple, unhurried, and then the pawn moved. 8th rank. A new queen appeared on the board, arrived with check, attacked Whitfield's king directly, cut off every square simultaneously. You need to understand something. Every morning for 3 years, Marcus had practiced with a set missing its black bishop. Every session, every game, every endgame drill, he'd done it with a gap where that piece should have been. He had learned to win without it. He had learned to win around the absence. He had trained his mind to find power in a position that looked incomplete. and the piece he practiced without was the queen. So when the moment came to create one from nothing, from a single pawn that had walked quietly across the entire board while everyone was watching something else, he didn't need to think about it. He had done this 10,000 times in a kitchen, on Callaway Street, under one overhead light, at a table where the chairs didn't match. Marcus looked at the board. Then he looked at Whitfield. "Checkmate in 2, he said, quietly. Not a performance, a fact. Whitfield's hand moved to a piece. Pulled back, he ran the lines. First variation, second variation. Every path closed, every exit occupied. The position had been over for 5 moves. He'd been playing in a room that was already locked. He didn't move. The room held its breath in a way that actual held breath never quite captures. It was the silence of 80 people simultaneously understanding something. Then Dr. Simone Reardon stood up. She did not reach for the microphone right away. She stood first. Then she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you who you just watched." The room turned to her completely. The young man across from Mr. Whitfield is Marcus Webb. He is 18 years old. He is the son of Diana Webb, who has worked in this house for 11 years. She paused. He holds a United States Chess Federation rating of 2,313. That is national master level. He has not lost a single rated game in 4 years. 151 consecutive wins. He has won the New Jersey State Open, the Northeast Scholastic Invitational, and the Mid-Atlantic Junior Championship. She paused again. A shorter pause this time, but heavier. He registered for every tournament under his initials. MW. Nobody in this room knew his name until tonight. Silence. Then a sound like a room catching itself mid-exhale. Phones came out. 1 first, then 3, then a dozen. The video that started recording in that moment. Just the back of Marcus's head, Dr. Reardon standing, the frozen chess position on the board, would be seen dim by 4 million people within 48 hours. But right now, none of that existed yet. Right now there was just the room and Preston Whitfield's face. He heard every word. He processed it the way a man processes something that contradicts too much at once. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved from Dr. Reardon to the board, to Marcus, to the crowd, looking for something. An ally. A face that still saw the world the way he did. A hand to pull him back to solid ground. He found Collins standing at the edge of the room. His son's face was unreadable. Not angry, not celebrating, just present. Watching. Whitfield stood up. His chair made a sound against the platform. He pointed at Diana. Not at Marcus, at Diana. "You planned this." His voice was tight, controlled, performed. "You brought him here deliberately. You used my home, my event, my guests." He looked around the room with his hands open, appealing to an audience he no longer had. "I open this house. I offer a challenge in good faith. And the help," he stopped himself, barely, "and my own staff uses it to make a scene, to embarrass this family." Diana opened her mouth, closed it. 11 years of practice in making herself small. The habit was faster than her voice. But Dr. Simone Reardon was already speaking. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Mr. Whitfield, you made a public challenge. A player in the room accepted. The game was played on your board, with your pieces, in your house, in front of your guests, under your rules. There was no setup. There was no trick." She let one beat of silence pass. "The only thing that happened here tonight that you didn't plan for is that the best player in the room turned out to be the one you never looked at." Someone in the back of the room said audibly, "She's right." 3 other people nodded. Whitfield's mouth opened, closed, opened. Marcus stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not step toward Whitfield. He just stood. "You said something earlier tonight, Mr. Whitfield, before the game, to your guests." He looked at the board for a moment. "You said chess was the purest measure of the mind, that there was no way to fake intelligence at a chessboard." He looked up. "You were right." He did not say anything else. He didn't need to. The room exhaled, and then the applause began. Not the condescending applause from the beginning of the evening. The real kind. The unplanned kind. The kind that happens when a room full of people has been holding something and finally lets go. Marcus didn't look at the crowd. He looked across the room, past the platform, past the chandeliers, to the column at the edge of the ballroom where his mother was standing. Diana was crying. Not theatrically. The quiet kind, the kind where you don't decide to cry, it just happens and you find out after. One hand pressed flat against her chest, other gripping the column. Marcus walked to her, through the crowd, past the champagne, past the tuxedos, past every person who had walked through the same rooms Diana walked through and never once asked her last name. She grabbed him. He was taller than her by almost a full head. She held him anyway, and in a house where Diana had spent 11 years being no one, her son put his arms around her and she was, for the first time, absolutely visible. Preston Whitfield did not shake Marcus's hand. He did not nod. He did not do what a man does when he loses with dignity, because that requires being the kind of man who has practiced losing, and he had surrounded himself for 30 years with people paid to prevent that practice. He walked off the platform, through the side door, gone. The video was online before Diana and Marcus reached the parking lot. By the time they got home to Calloway Street, it had 800,000 views. The comments were already arriving in the thousands. By Wednesday morning, 9 million views. By the following weekend, 22 million. The hashtag Marcus Webb began trending on Thursday. By Friday, it had been joined by See the Mother. And then, something nobody expected. Colin Whitfield posted a video, not from a publicist, not scripted. He was sitting in what appeared to be his dorm room at Georgetown, wearing a plain gray t-shirt, and he looked like he hadn't slept. I want to be honest about what my father did and what I didn't do. I watched it happen. I'd been watching things like it happen for years. I said a lot of nothing for a long time. He stopped. Marcus deserved better. Diana deserved better. Every person who has worked in that house deserved better. I'm sorry I'm the one saying it now, instead of the one who stopped it when it was happening. That video got 14 million views in 3 days. And Preston Whitfield III, the man who had described chess as the purest measure of intelligence, found himself unable to outsmart his own guests, his own footage, his own words, or his own son. The consequences arrived in layers, the way they always do when a structure collapses. They never fall all at once. First, the lawyers. Whitfield's legal team released a statement within 72 hours, claiming the $1 million offer had been a social gesture, a piece of theater, never intended as a binding contract. This statement was released on a day when 22 million people had watched Whitfield slam the check on the table and say the words clearly, on multiple camera angles, with 80 witnesses. 3 legal analysts on 2 different networks said the same thing within the same news cycle. Verbal contract, public witnesses, video documentation. This was not a difficult case. Whitfield's publicist advised him to settle, quietly, without a statement, make the check real and make the story go away. But Marcus didn't want it to go away quietly. He sat at the kitchen table on Calloway Street, the same table where he had worked through chess positions every morning since he was 11, and told Diana what he wanted to do with the money. Diana said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandfather would say something about this. I know what he'd say." "Tell me." "He'd say a rook doesn't go sideways. It goes all the way across." She looked at him for a long time. The Robert Webb Chess Foundation launched 4 months later. $1 million, directed entirely toward chess programs in underfunded public schools across South Jersey and Philadelphia. Free equipment, free coaching, free tournament registration for any student who couldn't afford the fee. Every dollar aimed at kids who looked like Marcus. Kids with talent and no infrastructure. Kids practicing on broken sets with missing pieces. Kids whose mothers worked before dawn and couldn't make it to the Saturday tournaments. Marcus kept nothing. Diana tried to argue with him once, just once. He said, "Grandpa drove a bus for 30 years. He read Douglas on his lunch break. He didn't have anything to give me except the right words at the right time." That's what I want to pass on. Diana stopped arguing. The foundation launched with partnerships in 11 schools. 47 students enrolled in the first month. By spring, 2 of them, a 14-year-old from Pennsauken and a 16-year-old from West Philadelphia, had competed in their first regional tournaments. The 16-year-old, a quiet girl named Jordan, who carried her pieces in a drawstring bag, won her section. After a Tuesday session at one of the schools, a 12-year-old named Darius walked up to Marcus and asked without preamble, "Did you ever get nervous before a big game?" Marcus thought about this for a longer moment than Darius expected. Every single time. "What did you do about it?" "I thought about my grandfather. And then I thought about the position." He paused. "The position always has an answer. You just have to be patient enough to find it." Darius nodded like he was filing this in a permanent place. He went back to his board. A minute later, he played a move Marcus hadn't suggested. A rook shift to the open file. Correct. Unprompted. Marcus smiled. Constance would have liked that now. Preston Whitfield. This isn't a story where the villain is destroyed. Real consequences are almost never that clean. But there is a different kind of damage, the kind that happens to a man who has spent his entire life constructing a version of himself that cannot survive contact with truth. Within 6 weeks of the gala, Whitfield stepped down from 2 nonprofit boards. No explanation was given publicly. The Whitfield Classic was not held the following year. The event's website went offline without announcement. A journalist at the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote a profile piece about Whitfield that included interviews with 4 former members of his household staff. The details were small, individually. No single one was a firing offense, but together they assembled into a portrait of a man who moved through rooms full of people and saw only objects. Gerald, the house manager, quietly resigned 3 weeks after the gala. He did not give a statement. He did not need to. The alabaster chess set, $170,000, was moved to a storage facility in Morristown, New Jersey, and has not been retrieved since, as of the date of this story. A guest from the gala told a journalist, "I don't think he can sit across a chessboard anymore without seeing that young man's face. And I think that's the appropriate punishment." But the sharpest consequence was not public. It was private. 2 months after the gala, Colin Whitfield came home for winter break. He and his father sat in the same room for 3 days without having a real conversation. On the 4th day, Colin put a piece of paper on the kitchen table. It was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten. He had been working on it since October. It said, "Among other things, I spent 23 years watching you treat people the way you treated Marcus and Diana. I said nothing because saying something cost more than I was willing to pay. I'm writing this down now because I need you to understand that your silence isn't invisible. The people you pass through like furniture, they see you. They know exactly who you are. I knew too. I just looked away, and I'm done looking away." Preston Whitfield read the letter alone. He folded it in thirds and placed it in the top drawer of his desk. Not in the trash, in the drawer. His assistant, who had worked for him for 9 years, noted later that he was quieter after that. Not reformed, not visibly remorseful, but quieter. Like a man who had discovered, at considerable cost, that there is a floor beneath the floor he thought was the bottom, and that falling through it is not theoretical. 1 year later, Marcus Webb, 19, competed in the U.S. Junior Championship in St. Louis, Missouri. He did not win. He finished fourth, lost 2 games, one to a 20-year-old from Chicago, one to a 19-year-old from California, who played an opening Marcus had never seen in live play. He sat in the hallway outside the playing hall after the California loss, head in his hands. Diana sat down beside him. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on his back. The next morning, Marcus went back in and won his last 3 games. This is not the part of the story that gets made into a highlight reel. This is the part that's true. The willingness to lose. The willingness to return. The practice of showing up for the board, even when the board has just shown you something humbling. Constance Osi still runs the program on Vine Street, 2 evenings a week. Her hands shake slightly now, and she can't demonstrate moves as fluidly as she once could. But she still sees things. Move 19, move 31. She'll tap the board with a finger and say, "You saw it. You chose not to believe it. Trust the position." Marcus visits every other Saturday. Diana Webb no longer works on Edgemont Road. She has a new position. Office coordinator at a middle school in Camden. Regular hours, full benefits, weekends free. She still irons Marcus's shirt before every tournament, even the ones she can't attend. Some things don't change. Some things shouldn't. The rook pin is still on the bag, and now I want to speak to you directly. Marcus Webb is not a real person, but the kid sitting in a classroom right now who has worked something out that no one has noticed. He's real. The mother who gets up before dawn and polishes other people's floors and has never once been asked her last name in 11 years. She's real. They don't need anyone to rescue them. They need someone to stop looking through them. Constance Osi saw Marcus when he walked into a room at age 11. Robert Webb saw Marcus in a hospital bed. Diana saw Marcus every morning at a kitchen table. 3 people who looked directly at him without asking what he was worth first. That's not a minor thing. That is, in fact, the whole thing. If this story landed somewhere real for you, not because of the checkmate, but because you recognized something in it, share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not invisible. Leave a comment with the name of the first person who ever really looked at you. The teacher, the coach, the grandparent, the stranger on a Tuesday who said one sentence that day'd. Let them be seen, because everybody deserves to be seen.